What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Finger WAG Podcast. My name is Gideon Hertz. I'm the host of the Finger WAG Podcast, coming to you after taking the week off because of summer. But we are back because we have real life Georgetown Hoyas basketball coming up in the next couple of weeks that we need to get you all ready for. And I'm sure you all are excited, as I am, for actual Georgetown Hoyas to play actual real basketball against actual real opponents at the Global Jam exhibition tournament in Toronto. We'll have a lot more coverage on that and some exciting news about the Finger WAG's coverage of the Global Jam, but we are back this week to get you prepared with Jake Foote diving into the roster. We'll have a two-part roster preview this week. We will look at sort of the off-season moves as a whole, guys going out, and particularly the guys coming in, break it all down for you. And then next week, we'll look at the returning guys as well as the roster as a whole, give some overall impressions, and make sure that you are ready to consume all of the Global Jam content and parse everything that's coming out of that. Jake Foote is back to help us talk through that. So without further ado, let's get it going. Welcome back to the Finger WAG Podcast. I am back with Jake Foote, excited to talk real Hoyas basketball, real Hoyas basketball players. What's up, Jake?
Not much, Gideon. Good to see you again. Good to talk.
We actually have some real basketball coming up, which is exciting. In a couple weeks, it was announced Georgetown is going to be participating in the Global Jam exhibition tournament. Count me as somebody who did not know that existed before it was announced by Georgetown a couple weeks ago. Any thoughts on Georgetown playing in this exhibition tournament in Toronto before we dive into roster stuff?
Well, I think it's cool. I think it's exciting for all of us that care about it, that in the dog days of summer, we're going to have a couple of Georgetown basketball games. We'll give you a sneak peek of the guys that we do have. I'm assuming it's their foreign trip that you get allotted every, I think it's 4 or 5 years that they're using. But it's the type of trip that I think you can benefit from. They're definitely going to be playing some teams of high quality. So exciting. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, they'll be up against the under 23 national teams from other countries. We will have more coverage about previewing the games, previewing the schedule, all of that. And I'm very excited to announce, I guess, here that the Finger WAG will be on site for the Global Jam tournament. Some shape, form, or capacity, we will have representatives from the Finger WAG in Toronto watching basketball and giving you all of the coverage. So don't know yet whether the Global Jam will actually be aired in the US. I did some digging on that, and it looks like some games were aired last time this tournament was played in 2023. CBS Sports Network picked up some of them. Some were on a tape delay. We don't know. So we'll keep you posted on that. But regardless, you will have coverage of the Global Jam. We're very excited to actually talk about Georgetown, real life Georgetown basketball. I've said that a lot, but I'm excited about it.
Yeah, excited. We'll have a guy or two there, and excited that we're getting closer and closer to actual basketball again.
Yeah. In other banner Georgetown news, we had the roster officially dropped today, the day that we're recording this, which is great because we were going to talk about roster, and we're going to dive into a roster preview this week and next week to get everybody ready for Global Jam, so everybody knows what they're looking for, who they're looking at. We're going to talk basically an off-season overview today. We'll talk about the guys who have left briefly, and then talk about the guys who have come in, and next week we'll dive into the returning guys. I think we'll have a lot to say about those guys and how the overall roster shapes up. I'm so excited to talk about the roster today, and I appreciate Georgetown program, the administration, dropping the roster officially on the day that we're recording this pod. That's great. Great synergy. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it works out. They're definitely a little late to the punch compared to the rest of the college basketball world, but we'll take it.
I was concerned that we weren't going to get one before the Global Jam, so I'm good.
It's also a win that every presumed scholarship player is there. No surprises.
Yeah, with their names spelled correctly too, which is great. Baby steps, little wins. All right, let's talk about really quick. Let's do the bad part of this, or the worst part of this first, and just talk about the guys who are out the door, transfers out. Obviously, this is the state of college basketball now that we need to get used to this. But I've broken this group into kind of three different chunks. We've got the starters who have left, and that's Jaden Epps off to Mississippi State, Drew Fielder going home to Boise State after briefly flirting with, or somebody jumping the gun on him, to USC. That never made a whole lot of sense to me. He's going home to Idaho, to Boise State, where I think he'll be well suited. Then we've got the depth, had some moments, guys. Jordan Burks on his way to UCF. Curtis Williams headed to Tulane, where Georgetown seems to have a little bit of a pipeline going after Rowan Brumbaugh went down there. And then the end of bench didn't quite work out. Drew McKenna off to Old Dominion. We'll start, Jake, with your just general reactions of the guys who are out the door. Anything that really jumps out at you from those transfers?
Nothing in particular. I think everybody that they wanted back is back, or everybody that they really cared for back is back, and that other kids made some business decisions to find elsewhere to play basketball. I think the only person that you'd really could argue about having a role on, or a major role on, this version of the team would be Epps, but and Epps is a decent to good college basketball player, but I think we saw last year that the Malik and Jaden Epps two small guard combo didn't work out all that great. If it was to work out, the two of them were going to have to be pretty elite offensively, and they just weren't. In fact, I think Epps was probably better on the defensive side of the ball than on the offensive side of the ball last year, which if you told me at the beginning of the season, probably would have laughed at you. That being said, I do feel bad for Epps, because I think if he was healthy and right last year, he would have put together a really nice season. He would have been a major part of the turning of the guard for the school and for the program. So I wish him well at Mississippi State. He's going to another school that's going to play him next to a really small guard. Hubbard's going to have the ball in his hands more than Epps. He's going to have to find a role defensively, and it's going to be in the SEC. So I'm sure he's going to have some sort of opportunity, but it's a weird situation for the kid in his senior year. Again, wish him the best, but I think the staff at Georgetown definitely made the decision that they wanted to start putting together a bigger and more physical team for the challenge of the Big East.
Yeah, that becomes abundantly clear as soon as you start looking at the guys they brought in, which we'll do in a second, that bigger is definitely a priority. Any thoughts on Fielder out the door to Boise State?
Fielder, again, I think is a kid that found his level. I like Drew. He always played hard for us. He definitely cared about the staff, cared about the school, played with passion. He just had some limitations that I don't think fit the model of how Cooley and this staff wants to play. And those limitations are his interior defense. The Mountain West is a good conference where Boise State plays, and it's going to be a real challenge for him on the defensive side of the ball, because there's kids at that level that can really play, but he should be a really good offensive player at that level. He's kind of always been a little too good for mid-major basketball, but fighting an uphill battle in high major basketball, and that he wasn't a five or center, in that he didn't really protect the rim or play with a ton of physicality, but he really wasn't a four either, because he didn't defend in space all that well, and the jump shot came and went. But at the end of the day, he's 6'11". He's skilled. He can score around the hoop. He's got 2 more years to put it together. I think he found a good situation for him, playing under a good coach. in a league that's a little bit of a step down. I think he's going to have a successful rest of his career, but I think both player and program probably made the right decision stepping away from each other.
Yeah, it does seem like with all of these guys, we have no idea what the conversations were like, and I'm not going to pretend that we do, but it does feel like there's at least a case that all of these could be mutual, or both sides saying thanks for the year or 2 years, or I guess 2 years is the most, but there's opportunity elsewhere. We're going to bring other guys in. These are not guys that we are losing a ton of sleep over leaving.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of what happens nowadays is, yes, maybe there's these conversations with, I wouldn't say that it's, hey, we don't see you as part of our team. Maybe that's
Sure.
explicitly happening, but it's probably saying, hey, we want you back, but we want you back in a different role than you were just in. We still see you as this, like in Drew's case scenario, maybe backup 4, break glass in case of emergency 5, which, given how the portal played out, he probably would have had a chance to play significant minutes at the 4, but that probably just wasn't what a kid was looking for when he was entering his upperclassman seasons. And that's probably why there was the little USC flirtation and then the renege from that when he learned that his role at USC probably would have been comparable to what his role would have been at Georgetown. So, yeah, and I'm sure, again, I don't know the type of conversations that they're having, but I could imagine the same type of conversation takes place with like a Curtis Williams, where you can come back and be a bench defender, bench shooter. But again, if you want to be a kid that plays 30 minutes a game and a kid that gets 12 shots a game, Curtis found his level, which is at Tulane. He should have a really good year there. And again, we should all be hoping for the best for him and rooting for him. But it's just a case scenario in which these kids find their level, especially in an environment in which they're allowed to move on a yearly basis.
Yeah, I think that's the takeaway from me too, is these guys finding their level. All of them, I think, for the most part, are doing that. Is there anybody that you would have liked to see stay with the group that Georgetown assembled? Obviously, wouldn't be exactly the same, but the bulk of the folks that are brought in, who we'll talk about here in a second, anybody that you think would have fit really well?
The 5 guys that left, I think the best fit would have been Curtis Williams.
Interesting.
Just because I think that Cooley really doesn't want to sacrifice size, length, athleticism on this current team, even if they do have a hard time scoring. And Curtis, we at least have evidence that he can guard and guard multiple positions on the perimeter. Again, he would have been playing in a minor role, and I'm not losing sleep because I think some of these acquisitions that we touched upon are going to be able to fill that role that Curtis played and have probably more evidence that they do it at a better level at the high major level. So I think it worked out for everybody. Again, I wish all these kids well, all 5 of them, but I'm not losing sleep over any of them.
Yeah. Once a Hoya, always a Hoya. Appreciate their contributions. We'll be rooting for them.
All 5 will live forever.
All right, let's go to the fun part now.
All right.
We have a hefty transfer in class to get through. And again, I've broken these guys up into tiers, sort of, which as soon as I did it, almost immediately broke down. But we'll start there and then talk through each one of them independently as well. So I've got the immediate contributors, guys who are stepping up into potentially increased roles. And even within that, there's a split, because you've got KJ Lewis, the 5-star transfer. I think he's top 15 transfer according to Evan Mia, coming in from Arizona. And then below him, you've got Langston Love, who's a high pedigree guy and has the potential, I think, to be real immediate contributor. Then below them, you've got proven older guys. And I think on there, you've got Vince Iwuchukwu, started at USC, moved to St. John's. There's a case to be made that he could be somewhere in that first group of a increased role candidate guy. And then you've got Jeremiah Williams, Temple, Rutgers, grad transfer, guy who's proven that he can play. And then the third group, you've got your high upside, high pedigree PVI guys, both from PVI in Virginia. Deshaun Smith-Harris coming in from University of Maryland, and Isaiah Abraham coming in from UConn. Let me start, before we dive into each one of these guys individually, just your overall takeaways from this group that Cooley and staff have brought in.
Generally encouraged. I think even if you asked anybody around the program, they'd probably say they were aiming a little bit higher. I know both fans and probably staff alike felt that they were in a good position with Bryce Hopkins, and that's totally understandable. He had his best year of his college career playing under Coach Cooley, and they really kind of fell short filling in the blanks at that power forward position. They had Duncan Powell committed for a brief period of time before he ended up at Providence. So I wouldn't give it a total A+, but I do think it's a generally encouraging class. You're bringing in kids that last year played for major programs and major coaches. You know, you're bringing in a kid that, KJ Lewis, that's coming from an Arizona and a Tommy Lloyd program. Langston Love's coming from Scott Drew and Baylor. Iwuchukwu's coming from Patino and St. John's. Deshaun Harris-Smith's coming from Willard and Maryland. Isaiah Abraham's coming from Hurley and UConn. And these are guys that all coach towards the top level of the NCAA as a whole. And they should have some good habits, you'd hope, installed in them so that you aren't starting with them as totally a blank canvas, that you have some sort of baseline where you can mold them into the type of player that you see them as. The two kind of blue chippers I agree with, Lewis and Love, are guys that have had major significant roles on top 25 and on NCAA tournament teams. And those are definitely the guys that you're going to ask to take a bit of an increased role, and they're really going to need to pop for this team to be successful.
I mentioned this, but the big thing that's struck me just initially, there's a lot, I think, to take away, and we'll talk about a lot of this, but the biggest thing that jumped out at me is these are guys that are definitely prioritized size in these transfers. These seemed very clear that Cooley and staff wanted to get bigger, particularly at the guard spots, and they did. I'm also intrigued. I read a bunch of their recruiting profiles, and all of these guys were described as hard workers, tough nose, the types of guys you expect Cooley to gravitate to and to play well for.
Yeah, and
I'm encouraged by that.
If I could add to that,
yeah,
Cooley in the portal's also always been a pedigree guy. He's made a killing taking guys that were top 25, top 50, top 100 recruits, depending on the roles that he was offering them, giving them a life jacket, a second chance, or in some case scenarios, a third chance. And he's gotten it right with a lot of them. And that's what a lot of these kids are. Love was a good player at Baylor, but he was a top 30 kid in high school. Iwuchukwu was a top 30 kid in high school. Deshaun Harris-Smith was a top 30 kid in high school. Abraham, a top 100 guy that, you know, had committed to the defending national champions. So these guys at their core are guys that when they were younger could really play. And for one reason or another, it hasn't totally worked out at the college level. And we'll see how successful Cooley is with it. But in his past, he's really targeted that subsection of recruits and that subsection of transfers, and he's gotten some good results with it. Most notably, Bryce Hopkins at Providence.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at each one of these guys, and we'll probably have more to say on a couple of them than others. But want to give everybody a just preview into what to expect out of each of these guys. If there's anything that you see that in their strengths or weaknesses, or what you might be looking for in the first action that we see at the Global Jam. Let's start at the top with the 5-star incoming transfer. That's KJ Lewis, 6'5" guard, notably from El Paso, Texas, played his last year of high school at Duncanville for David Peavy. Thank you, David. Appreciate that connect as well. 2 seasons at Arizona. Last season, he averaged 11, 4, and 3. Not a shooter, straight line driver, but has some offensive tools as well as defensive tools. I mentioned Evan Mia and others have him as a top 15 transfer this season. So he's the stud of this group, if you will. I love a comp. I jumped into CBB Analytics has a great comp tool that sort of profiles guys who profile like KJ Lewis, and a couple of guys that jump out from that list. Devin Carter from Providence, Stephon Castle from UConn, Kaderi Richmond, both from Seton Hall, St. John's, Justin Simon from St. John's, and then if you're looking down at more of the floor, hopefully you've got a Dylan Adewusu from Seton Hall. We can dive into more of these, but what's your overall impression of KJ?
A total massive get. Probably the biggest transfer in that we've ever had. And I know Micah was extremely successful, but KJ is going to be more highly regarded at the time of his enrollment. Basically start at the beginning with him. He played on a really amazing Duncanville team under David Peavy. They finished his senior year number 1 in the country in the USA Today rankings. He was their second best player with Ron Holland, but was a 17 points, 10 rebounds a game guy. Was kind of this middle of the pack, top 60 to top 90 ranked recruit coming out of high school, but immediately got a massive load at Arizona, or a massive role at Arizona. His load picked up his sophomore year to decreasing results, but his freshman year, he was a great player. He shot 47% from the field, 34% from 3, 79% from the line. It looked like he had the makings of a guy that could shoot, when in high school it was thought that he was not so much of a shooter. And after his freshman year, Sam Vecini of The Athletic, who's become kind of the primary draft guy out there, mocked Lewis 25th overall, projected first-round pick going into his sophomore year. Now, you're right on what you touched about his sophomore year. He just didn't shoot it well. Still had a productive year, averaging 11, 5, and 3 on a Sweet 16 team in which Caleb Love was taking the majority of the shots. Is a kid that can put the basketball in the hoop pretty much at any level in college basketball. Just unfortunately, he shot 19% from 3. Now, the thought is that he had a nagging wrist issue that he's getting resolved this summer, and hopefully that improves. But if he has a similar jump in his three-point efficiency and quality as did his high school coach's son in Micah, you're going to have a really special player on your hands.
It could really only go up.
The shooting, yeah. I mean, he's a good free throw shooter. He shoots 81% from the line. I think it's going to be, they're going to ask more of him offensively than Arizona did. They're going to put the ball in his hands a lot. And he really probably, with the amount of minutes he's going to play, it's not going to be 25 a game like at Arizona. It's going to be 35 a game like Micah played here.
Yeah.
He should be a guy that's kind of like 16 points and 6 rebounds off the bus, who could become one of the premier players in the conference if the jump shot sticks.
Yeah.
Now, he loses out on the summer for the most part, but it remains to be seen, if he's something like Micah, then he'll be special, like I said.
Yeah, you mentioned the wrist injury, both in terms of, maybe there's some positivity to be had if that was a culprit for his jump shooting last year. Also loses out on a lot of the summer. We don't know whether he'll play Global Jam. My expectation would be probably not, but who knows? I do think the things that you point out that I'm looking for, will be looking for at Global Jam, if he does play, certainly his jump shot, how willing is he to take that? What does it look like? And his ability as kind of that secondary creator. What we'll talk about overall roster stuff next week, but presumably your starting backcourt is KJ Lewis, Malik Mack. What are your initial thoughts on those two guys together?
Well, I think they're going to start Love too, and Lewis is going to play more as not a small forward, but a third guard that can guard anybody 1 through 4, depending on the matchup. I think any way you break it down, it's a good backcourt, especially given kind of what's left in the Big East. The Big East is definitely going to take a step back quality wise, and all three of those guys have put the ball in the hoop at a high major level. And what KJ does to differentiate himself from the rest of the group is that he's an elite defender. He's Micah Peavy good on defense, and all the metrics pretty much say so. If you look at Micah's last year at TCU and compare it to what Lewis did this past year at Arizona, he has Micah beat in just about any category. He scored more points per 40 minutes. He had a higher assist rate. He had a higher steal rate. He quadrupled his block rate. That's another thing that you'll notice about his game. He's this jumping jack that has a really uncanny ability to help and to contest in a straight line. And he can really protect the rim as a guard, which is a novel thing to have when in many case scenarios you're going to ask him to guard threes and potentially even fours at times. He guarded Cooper Flagg when Arizona lost to Duke in the tournament. He really is a high-quality defender that's going to turn defense into offense much in the same way that Micah did. As far as what it entails for the backcourt, I think it's great for Mac because Mac's not going to be, I don't think, overwhelmed with any of his defensive matchups depending on what the other team puts out size-wise. There might be just some nights where he just has to take the point guard position. But Mac is really going to need to shoot the ball. And same goes for Langston Love because it's not guaranteed that KJ Lewis is a spacer of any sort. So we'll see. But on paper, really good backcourt that needs to play towards the top of the league for the team to have the success that they want to have.
Let's talk about Langston Love. To me, he's kind of the biggest unknown, really, because, as you mentioned, his serious pedigree coming out of high school. 6'5" guard out of Texas as well. He's had 3 seasons at Baylor that have been largely injury-plagued. As you mentioned, top 50 recruit coming out of high school. I think he was up at 38. Coming out, he was touted as an open shot maker, low mistake player, really good rebounder. Type of guy who is going to play hard no matter what. For his career, again, very, very up and down with injuries, but he's a 38% three-point shooter. Last year in the tournament, he in the game Baylor played against Duke, he went 3 for 7 from 3, 42. A couple of his comps that I picked out: Naheem Aline from UConn, Jordan Longino from Villanova, and AJ Reeves from Providence. But the question, I think, is, can he be a consistent shooter at higher volume? What are you looking at with Langston?
I'm less questionable about what he is as a shooter. I think he's a great shooter. There's plenty of evidence that he can be a high-level shooter, especially playing high-major basketball against the best teams in the country. I'm really just interested in where he's going to be athletically. Like you said, he's athletic. Injuries have hampered his entire career. When he was being recruited, he was a mainstay in a Montverde team that was the best team in the country. And then he busted his ACL before he ever played a game at Baylor. And since then, it's just been lower body injuries. Season last year was much like Epps's, in which an ankle just slowed him down and he didn't shoot it well. He still played a lot of minutes and scored 8-9 points per game on a team that was an 8 seed. So if that's your baseline of a bad Langston Love, then you've still got a competent, quality, high major player. But for me, for him to really be valuable, not only is he going to have to shoot it really well, but he's going to have to be a good defensive player, which he's been more in theory than in application in his college career. He's 6'5". He can move. He can guard the perimeter, but he hasn't been right athletically. And Baylor's been a far better defensive team with him off the floor the last 2 years. In fact, this past year they had a defensive rating of 105.4 with him off, which is equivalent to 140th in the country. Their defensive rating with him, or I should say with him on the court. Their defensive rating with him off the court was the equivalent of 33rd in the country. So they jumped 110 spots, with him off the court. In the previous season, their defense jumped about 70 spots nationally with him off the court. So a little concerns there. The positive, though, is that he's a great shooter. He's a similar player to Epps in that he can get downhill and score, even if it's not that pretty and it doesn't jump off the page in terms athletically. But all three offenses he's been a part of on Baylor, when he was on the floor, were top 11 offenses in the country. He's never been part of a group with a worse offensive rating than 125.6. So he's not going to hurt you on that end. And he could be a guy like you're hoping for Lewis, or like what happened with Micah last year, that you just give him a little more freedom offensively and it all comes together and he becomes a great player.
Do you think he will benefit at all defensively playing alongside KJ Lewis, who's going to draw the sort of the top of the scouting report?
Yeah, 100% KJ is going to have the best guy out there, but Love's going to play next to Mac a lot too. And when he's playing next to Mac, he's going to be having to guard somebody bigger. I do think he, in theory, should benefit from playing with a bigger team. At Baylor, they played small, and they played Norcat O'Meara most of the time at the center this past year, he plays his butt off and he's a hell of a rebounder, but he was 6'5" without shoes at the draft combine. So they played Love as a somewhat of a 4, albeit VJ Edgecombe was out there doing the majority of the front court work. So he's going to benefit from having more defensive-oriented players alongside of him, I think.
Move along to our next group of guys. These are proven older guys coming in either as a senior or a grad transfer. Start with Vince Iwuchukwu. We've talked a little bit about him in the past, and I know that you are cautiously optimistic about his upside here. Really quickly, he's a 7'1" center, also out of Texas. Seems like we've got a Texas to DC pipeline that is fully established.
All three of these guys from Texas. Yep. So thank you, David Peavy, again.
He 2 seasons at USC, then transferred to St. John's, played 1 season last year under Pitino. As you mentioned, coming out of high school, very, very highly rated recruit, top 30. Has never really been a starter, though, in his college career so far. Couple of comps that jumped out at me from CBB Analytics. Andre Screen from Butler. Folks remember him. Frederick King from Creighton. And then good old friend Qudus Wahab on that list, which I'm not as convinced about, but it was a fun one to pop up on the screen. And I don't know whether it was first stint Qudus or second stint Qudus, but talk me through what you're looking at with Vince Iwuchukwu.
I've talked about Vince quite a bit if you caught our introductory podcast with me. Again, yeah, cautiously optimistic is a good way to put it, probably just short of bullish. He kind of has had an unfortunate college career thus far. When he was coming into USC, he was a top 25 guy that they thought might have been Evan Mobley part 2. And he had a cardiac incident before he ever played for USC, which is a theme for all these USC five-star recruits that they're cursed before they ever play. And he never really got his footing playing with USC. Now, if I can sum him up in brief so that I don't get super long-winded, he's big as hell. He's toolsy as hell. He can run. He can jump. He's long. In theory, he can shoot it a little bit, but it's not something that he's put together at all. The shot selections has left a lot to be desired on offense, and he's had 2 coaches now, both of which highly respected coaches in Enfield and Pitino, that have either found alternatives to him or didn't totally make it click. Again, a perfect example of a Cooley project where he might be the guy that has the key that unlocks him. That remains to be seen, but my positive opinion on Vince is that even if it's not unlocked offensively, he's going to provide a baseline defensively that the group's really going to need. In his 3 years of college, he's been a pretty high level to elite rim defender. All 3 seasons, when he's been on the floor, opponents have shot less than 53% at the rim, which is in the upper echelon of college basketball. Sorber was a total outlier at 48%, pretty much best 2 or 3 in the country. But every center we've had play under Cooley that wasn't Sorber has been horrific. Supreme Cook, when he played, opponent shot 67% at the rim. Fielders 2 years without Sorber on the floor was about 64% each year. So both those guys were somewhat of turnstiles at the rim, and Vince at the very least will be able to clear some stuff out there, which will help the defense out immensely. Then if he becomes a guy that can put it in the hoop and be anything more than just a rim runner, you've got a really good player on your hands. But again, this is going to be the theme for a lot of these guys. It's going to be, if this happens, then we're all right. So it's kind of unfortunate that you don't have these ready-made tons of evidence that these guys are going to crush it and that you need a couple things going your way. But it wouldn't take me long to convince myself that Iwuchukwu was going to put it together. And I know the staff really liked him and wanted him independent of whether Sorber came back or not. So we'll trust the staff's judgment on this one.
Yeah. Defensively, you mentioned a couple of things that just stuck out at me while I was looking at it. Block percentage last year was in the 94th percentile. So he helps on that end, as you mentioned. Also in the 85th percentile of blocks to personal fouls. So he's able to give good rim protection without fouling, which is something.
I'd hesitate on that a little bit. If you look at his numbers closer, last year he had 5.6 personal fouls per 40 minutes, which is pretty reasonable for a center. You know, you hope he plays 22 minutes and he commits 3 fouls and you're not really up against it with them. In Big East play, and again, this is small sample size because Pitino was only playing him 6-7 minutes a game, he fouled 9 times per 40 minutes. So I think that's actually going to be the biggest thing with him defensively, is if he can actually play the 20 to 25 minutes that you might ask of him without getting in foul trouble immediately.
See, that's why we have you on
to
catch those things. That's really helpful, very insightful. I do think that that's going to be a major theme this year, as you mentioned, particularly as we saw just a brief sample of Julius and his tendency to foul as well in the FIBA World Cup. So something we'll be looking for. I'm not going to ask you to predict the starting lineup, but is your expectation that Vince is the starting 5 on opening day?
Yeah, I'm going to say that he's the guy on day one. Again, I don't know if that lasts the entire season. I think that's probably more dependent on Julius than on Vince. But yeah, I bet that he's the guy day one.
Next guy is our grad transfer coming in, Jeremiah Williams, 6'4" guard out of Chicago, did 2 seasons at Temple, 2 seasons at Rutgers, started 26 games at Rutgers last year. Couple of quick comps for him that popped out: Quincy McKnight from Seton Hall, Justin Simon, St. John's, Aaron Thompson from Butler. Jeremiah Williams, one of the latest transfers, I think, to be announced, one of the last guys who came in. What are your thoughts on him?
Well, I think at the end of the transfer portal cycle, they were definitely looking for shooting more than the archetype that Williams is going to provide. But I really like the fit. I think he's a total Cooley fit. He's a tough kid, really, really good on the defensive side of the ball. He started 74 of 81 games that he's played in college. He was a captain on a Rutgers team. He didn't have a great year last year, but last year was the first year of his career that the ball's been out of his hands. He's been playing point guard the first 3 years, and last year I think he just did a lot of watching Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey play basketball. Now he's had 2 really good years. The best year was his first year at Rutgers 2 years ago, in which he scored a little more than 12 points per game, shot 46% from the field. He had an assist rate of 26% to a turnover rate at only 15%. And I'm not expecting that of him, but what it tells me is that he can be a productive to good high major basketball player, which some of the guys that we're bringing in don't have that record. So he's similar to Vince in that I think he can provide you a baseline of what you know you're going to get, and it's a relative competent player, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
Is your expectation that he's sort of slotted in as the backup point guard?
That would be my expectation. I think they're going to try to find ways to play him next to Mac because there might be games where you need him defensively more than you need Love spacing the floor. I do also think there's going to be games, even though I expect pretty good things from Malik this year, I think there's going to be games where you can tell in the first 10 minutes that he's not up for it physically. And this is a guy that you can bring in and he's not going to get pushed around. He can guard the other team's point guard the entire night. And if he puts it together shooting the three a little bit, then you've got a really quality player.
Yeah. Career 26% three-point shooter, under 2 attempts per game for his career. So just hasn't done it. And I think what you're starting to see, and we'll talk a lot about this next week, I imagine, but Malik Mack, whether Malik Mack shoots or not, is going to be a big key for this team.
Yeah, Mack, we'll talk a lot more about Mack in a following episode, but Mack needs to make a jump in a couple of aspects, basically shooting, facilitating, and strength. And I have faith that he can pull it off. But one thing that I actually may give credit to Jeremiah Williams here before he ever plays a game is he gets to guard Mack an entire summer. So Mack gets to go through July and August with a 210-pound pit bull guarding him every single day practice rather than whatever he had last year, which was probably a banged-up 18-year-old Kayvon.
Yeah.
And I know we all like Kayvon, but Mack needs that stimuli. He needs that challenge before November to be ready to be the type of player that they're going to ask him to be.
Our last group here, a couple of local kids, PBI guys, high upside with both of them, good pedigree, longer term guys, you might say, but who knows? Let's start with Deshaun Harris-Smith. Coming in as a 6'5" guard, 2 seasons in Maryland, top 30 recruit coming out of high school, lefty, which I always note, elite rebounder for his size. Saw in his profile that his last year of AAU at Peach Jam and through the EYBL season, he shot 40% from 3. So over a pretty consistent sample size might bode well for his shooting. Ultra competitive, seems like a Cooley guy. What are your thoughts on Deshaun Harris-Smith?
Well, first, I think it's kind of somewhat unfair. You put him in like a high upside,
fair,
low floor type of guy. I think he's established that he's a high floor guy and that he played 15 minutes per game on a Sweet 16 top 10 KenPom team this year.
Fair. I was mostly trying to get the PVI connection to fit, but
I've got you.
Noted, and touche.
But what that tells me, if you can play 15 minutes per game for a top 10 KenPom team, you can play for Georgetown. Now, you are right, though, that there's this huge variance on what type of player he is for Georgetown. Probably more variance than anybody on the roster, even including Vincent Julius. And to discuss Deshaun Harris-Smith, you got to go back to the beginning. You got to go back to when he was in high school, and he was the alpha dog in the DMV. He played at Paul VI. He went 96-22 in his career. He was 2-time Virginia Player of the Year. Ended up being the 26th ranked recruit in the class of 2023. Was snipping on the heels of the McDonald's All-American game. He actually lost the WCAC finals to Malik Mack's St. John's team, which was a relatively big upset at the time. But his last season, he averaged 18, 8, and 7, and he was just a bulldog. Anybody that wrote anything about him in the DMV talked about how tough he was, how competitive he was, how mean he was, and that's how he played. He played in high school like a 6'4" power forward, and he rebounded the offensive glass, and he backed people down, and he finished through contact. And you're right, in Peach Jam, he shot it well, but Takeover also played him in a similar fashion, almost like a small ball 4, in which he was the roll man on a lot of screens. A lot of his 3-pointers were pick and pop. They got him posting up against guards, which is where he thrives. Now, what's unfortunate for him is when he got to college, even despite this huge pedigree and the fact that Willard started him from day one, he played 29 minutes per game as a freshman, and to mixed results. He didn't score the ball or shoot the ball all that well. But what was unfortunate for him was that bully ball that he played in high school wasn't so accessible for him. And he was no longer the strongest, most athletic, toughest kid out there. And he's going to need to kind of make some adjustments in order to find an offensive niche that's not that. Or, maybe Cooley can unlock things. Cooley's been running that junk flex offense for 15 years and getting big guards posted up on smaller guards for years and years. So if there is a coach that was going to exploit a low post game or a small ball 4 game out of DHS, it's probably Ed. But I'm pretty high on him because I think you just got to let him be himself. He was the best player in the DMV when nobody was stepping in his way, trying to fix his jump shot or trying to make him this defensive only, role player. And on Maryland, he needed to be that because Maryland had 4 better offensive players than him every single time out there. But if you give him the freedom to try to be himself, I think it's a worthwhile lottery ticket. And the floor of him is a guy that you can play 20 minutes a night and he can guard some of the better guys in the gym, which is a novel player.
Last but not least, probably the true high upside, good pedigree guy, also from Paula 6, Isaiah Abraham, coming in as a sophomore after 1 year at UConn, in which he really did not play. 6'7" forward, top 100 recruit, small sample size on this guy. What should we know about him?
Another pedigree guy, played on those Paul VI teams that kicked everybody's ass. Consensus top 100 guy. His dad played at Marquette, big basketball family. His high school career, he went 97-13. Again, these Paul VI kids, they've had mixed results in college, but they're winners and they come from winning programs. He played not at all at UConn, but I wouldn't be concerned about that because Hurley's always like that. And he was behind McNeely, he was behind Caravan, he was behind Jalen Stewart, he was behind Jaden Ross. And Hurley did the same thing the previous year with Jaden Ross, where he played like 3-4 games in non-con and then said, you know what, we're trying to win a national championship. I got better guys. You're going to basically redshirt this year, even though it wasn't totally a redshirt, but you're going to practice with these NBA players and you're going to get better. Abraham, when he showed up on the UConn campus, Hurley had a lot of nice things to say about him. He's on the last day of their summer practice after his freshman year, he said more offense than we thought, even better than we thought we were getting, and a toughness and athleticism. Our type of guy, really, a great family pedigree. Now, Abraham's going to need to kind of work his way into a role with this group. There's going to be some guys that are older than him and more experienced at his position, but if he can become a guy that plays a little small ball 4, there'll be minutes to be had there. And I just think it's a compliment whenever Danny Hurley says our type of guy, really. That's going to be a kid that shows up, works hard, plays hard. And that seems to be the theme of what they're looking for, not only in the portal, but in the high school ranks, is just kids that play hard. And that's what Cooley's Providence's groups were. They weren't the most talented, and they got the most out of it because if they showed up every single game and they made it hard for opponents. And that's what this group's going to be. We probably 3 years ago would have said that we'd be beyond a Providence, but I think developing a floor of a Providence is actually a really good thing and complementary to what Providence has been the last 10, 15 years. And I cross my fingers here because some of these type of kids that he's bringing in are kids that really hit at Providence. And some of the rosters that he had at Providence that resembled rosters like this, he made NCAA tournament teams.
Yeah.
So, again, a lot of variance in the group, but hoping for the best.
Couple final just questions about the group for you. Again, we'll talk about the full roster, returning guys, and how everything fits together next week. But who do you see as the most impactful new face? And both right away, the guy who's going to make the biggest splash in the short term, also bringing in a couple of sophomores, juniors, guys who will presumably be around for a couple of years. Who do you think has the biggest long-term upside as well?
Short term, it's Lewis. It's KJ Lewis. There's no other right answer. They're gonna ask this kid to be Micah. They're gonna give him the same exact role. He's gonna defend the best perimeter player. He's gonna be the secondary creator. There are times where he might even be playing point guard. They're gonna ask him to score 15 to 20 points in some fashion, and he can do that in different ways than Micah. He doesn't need to shoot the three. He does really get to the line. He does shoot the free throws great, and he's a really great player in transition. But yeah, most impactful right away is KJ Lewis. They need him to be a first team All Big East type guy. In the long term, I'm going to kind of take this with some creativity. I think if they can get Deshaun Harris-Smith right, and he becomes a really quality college basketball player his last 2 years, you're going to develop and gain so much cachet in the DMV that you took this kid that was the pride and joy of the DMV 2-3 years ago, and you salvage his career. And in that way, you become a safe haven for every single kid from Washington, D.C. that it may not have panned out at their blue blood school that they went to start. So that would have, if you did get that right, that would have some pretty significant long-term ramifications in the power brokering of Washington, D.C., which is valuable with the amount of power the high schools and the AAU programs have. And then I do want to give a little last shout out, because I think that first question is most impactful short term is such a layup.
Yeah.
If I were to go out a limb and say somebody that, really made the jump, really outperformed what they were expecting, or what maybe the rest of the country would expect given what the player's done in their past, I'd give it a Vince. With each day, I convince myself more and more that you can find something there, and he's going to have a chance to play. I'm crossing my fingers, man, big time.
Lastly, I'm deeming this the Micah Peavy Award. It's not just breakout star, because I think we've touched on that, but who on this list is the guy who is going to play himself into the NBA, if any of them are going to do that? You mentioned KJ Lewis was on draft radar a little bit. All of these guys, I think, coming out of high school would have thought, that's my ultimate goal. It hasn't quite worked out. Who do you think is going to be the one that plays themselves into a late first round, second round pick or higher?
Again, I'm going to go with KJ Lewis. I think it's somewhat of a layup because of multiple reasons. And I should touch upon that. I'm not expecting any of these guys to become first round picks or even the early second round type pick that Micah was. Micah at his end was one of the best players in college basketball. He wasn't on a great team, but you couldn't play the wing position in college basketball much better than he was doing the last month and a half of the season.
Yep.
And if you are that good at basketball, you were going to play in the NBA. Now, KJ I pick because he has all the qualities that you'd probably need to survive in the NBA in terms of size, athleticism, physicality, coordination. He just needs to do two things, which is start shooting the ball better. And he's probably got to prove that he can play a little bit of point guard in the NBA, because he is more like 6'4". In the NBA, he's probably going to be, if he ever does make it that far, he'd be in that Caruso type secondary ball handler, point guard, like point of attack defender. And he's definitely got the best chance of all these guys, because all of these other guys are way on the outside looking in. If you really wanted to squint your eyes and convince yourself something, it would be that Iwuchukwu becomes a face-up shooter and a three-point shooter and is a guy that can run and jump and block shots, and somebody takes a chance on him. But again, the likelihood of that is extremely, extremely slim. I'm not holding my breath. But you have to say KJ, mostly also because the sell to KJ was definitely that, hey, come here for a year, do exactly what Micah did. Davey Peavy's probably giving him the same spiel and say, after a year, you're either an NBA player or we'll take care of you NIL-wise and try to get you back for a senior year. But the sell's got to be the NBA to get a kid like that to come here. That kid could have gone any team in the country that gave a damn about winning a national championship would have taken that kid with open arms.
Great. Lot to look forward to. Again, we'll talk full roster, returning guys, how all this fits together next week. But appreciate you getting us ready for real Hoya basketball with some new faces. We hopefully will see most, if not all, of these guys in Toronto. We'll have, as I mentioned, coverage from Toronto. We're excited to get a look at this group.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. I'm looking forward to discussing the returning players. Some played more than others, but should be able to kind of give a post-mortem report card to some of the guys that played. But again, not going to be too harsh. Excited about the whole group to some extent.
Thanks for listening to the Finger WAG Pod. Thanks to Jake Foote for giving us his insights on the incoming players, getting us ready for Global Jam. As I mentioned, we will have part 2 of our roster preview and looking at the overall roster and returning players specifically next week as we get ready for Hoya basketball in August. Follow us, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And thank you for watching and listening to the Finger WAG Podcast.